I get itchier scrolling through a sea of bookshelf speakers, trying to figure out whether any of them will actually make your living room sound like a small cinema without blowing a hole in your budget. The last thing you want is to splurge on a pair that sounds great on paper but ends up sounding flat when you finally fire up that new streaming service or finally crack open the Blu-ray of that classic film you've been meaning to watch. You're looking for something that will fill the space, give you a decent soundstage for music, and still blend into a room that's already dressed in a light, modern aesthetic. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In the next few minutes I'm going to walk through why the Acoustics 5020 bookshelf speakers in satin white might be the sweet spot for you, or why, if you have a different set of priorities, you might want to keep looking. First off, the 5020 is positioned as an immersive home theater solution, which tells you the company is targeting the crossover point between music listening and movie watching. That's a tricky balance. A speaker that's tuned too aggressively for movies can sound harsh on vocals, while a unit that's all about warm music can feel underpowered when you crank up an action sequence. The 5020 tries to bridge that gap with an innovative woofer design and a protected tweeter. In real-world terms, that means you'll get a tighter low-end punch without the kind of rattling you sometimes hear from cheaper bookshelf models, and the tweeter is less likely to be damaged if you accidentally bump the cabinet against a wall. If you live in a medium-sized room, say, a living room of 200 to 300 square feet, or you have a dedicated listening nook, the 5020 size works well. The speakers are compact enough to sit on a bookshelf or stand on a modest speaker stand, and the satin white finish is less intrusive than the usual matte black. I've seen a few setups where people placed them on either side of a TV and added a center channel and a sub for a full 5.1 system, and the result felt genuinely cinematic without needing a massive subwoofer to fill the gaps. For music lovers, the accurate soundstage claim holds up when you try a stereo recording of a jazz trio or a well-mixed acoustic album. The left-right imaging is clear enough that you can pinpoint each instrument, and the mids stay detailed without getting lost behind the bass. Now, who should definitely consider these? If you're a first-time buyer who wants something that sounds good right out of the box, the 5020 is a solid entry point. The speakers come as a matched pair, and the crossover is already set, so you won't have to tinker with EQ curves or invest in a separate receiver just to get decent sound. They also pair nicely with a mid-range AV receiver that can handle Dolby Atmos or DTS:X. If you're thinking about adding overhead speakers later, you won't be stuck with a system that can't keep up. People who stream a lot of Netflix, Disney+, or Spotify on a decent source will notice that dialogue stays clear even during fast-paced scenes, which is something you often miss with cheaper bookshelf speakers that either drown the voices in bass or make the highs shrill. On the flip side, if you're a seasoned audiophile with a dedicated listening room, a high-end floor-standing setup, or you already own a pair of reference speakers that you trust for critical listening, the 5020 might feel a little underwhelming. The bass, while tighter than a typical bookshelf, still relies on a separate subwoofer for that deep, rumbling impact you'd want for a true home theater experience. Also, the speakers are designed to be protected at the tweeter, which is great for durability but can slightly soften the very highest frequencies, something a critical listener might pick up when comparing to a reference monitor. One practical strength that often gets overlooked is the speaker's ability to stay in tune across different volumes. I've tested a few bookshelf pairs that start to sound boxy once you push past 70% volume, but the 5020 maintains its balance, which is a boon if you like to have the TV on at a moderate level while a family member is on a video call in the same room. The innovation in the woofer also means the speakers don't need a massive cabinet to deliver the low end, so you can keep the room looking tidy. No need to sacrifice floor space for a larger piece of furniture. A hidden trade-off, however, is the need for proper placement. Because the tweeter sits relatively close to the edge of the cabinet, putting the speakers right up against a wall can cause a slight overemphasis on the highs, making the sound a touch bright. The sweet spot is about a few inches of clearance from the sidewalls and a couple of feet from the back wall. If you're in a cramped apartment and can't give them that breathing room, you might end up compensating with